Contact, hands to action stations. From We Were Only Obeying Orders, Part 3. A quote from the novel The Choice by Claire Wade, 2020. Shauna is being taken from her cell to await execution. I quote, "Ray, please," she begged, not knowing what to ask for, what to hope for. He had his eyes closed as though none of this was happening. "I'm just doing my job," he said in a cold, dead voice. "Hurry up, Shauna." Lewis tapped his fancy watch. "Time's a ticking, and you don't have much to waste." End quote. The sky was clear moonlight. I stood in the forward lookout position. Glancing down from the mounted binoculars still trained ahead, I could see the silver flash of our bow wave above the line of the anti-fouling red paint coating the keel. I remember thinking how my mother once told me as we walked back to our little cottage in Norfolk's flatness, Nelson's country, in a place of massive skies over green pasture, of a moon her dad, who was in the RAF, called the Bomber's Moon. She added as we entered our cottage, closing the wooden front door, as I watched a cloud of pipe smoke rising up from Dad's favourite armchair, hearing the evening paper rustle just before he spoke his greeting. Mind you, they didn't like the skies being so bright and clear on nights like this. She paused to nod at Dad, who had risen, smiling from his chair. He finished a sentence for her, having heard the story a million times before. "Because although they could see their targets clear as day, the flak gunners could see them just as clearly in their searchlights." "Jim," Mum cut him off, hanging up her coat and moving into the room to take position near the dying fire. "You always finish that story for me." Dad shot me a glance as he folded the paper. "Come on in, son, and warm yourself. It's getting chilly these late evenings." As I returned my eyes to the lookout binoculars, aft of me the tannoy suddenly barked an order, snapping me out of memory into the present. "Contact astern, hands to action stations, special patrol duty personnel, close up." Seaman Cummings was designated SPD, Special Patrol Duty, this watch. I remember that as soon as the tannoy snapped off and the massive beam of our powerful searchlight swung astern, Cummings was leading a group of armed sailors as they took position, ringing the grey deck. He was carrying a holstered sidearm and a bronze flare gun in his black-gloved hands. He looked, as always, dark and menacing, his black headgear now covering the bandage that wrapped his bony skull. I watched as he turned, raising his own binoculars, and shouted, "Contact appears to be unmarked Zodiac with 10 persons on board. They're dead in the water." He lowered his binoculars, and I felt the vessel heel to port as we made a controlled about turn. The tannoy crackled again. This time it was the captain, his clipped voice sounding over the throbbing of the large marine diesels. "Contact designated Red 1. Slow ahead." The vessel lurched slightly as the power was reduced, and we approached Contact Red 1. As we moved within hailing distance, Cummings put the flare pistol down. Cupping his hands, he shouted to the small craft and its passengers, sporting what looked like very tattered orange life jackets. "This is Her Majesty's craft BledWell. Remain where you are and we'll draw alongside you. Do not try to restart your engines. Do not leave your vehicle or your vessel. We're armed and prepared to use lethal force." I smiled at the mistake. Cummings then picked up the bronze flare pistol again, keeping it pointing down towards the aft deck. I heard his pace slow as he said those last words, accentuating them as if he were giving some kind of speech to would-be enemy prisoners of war. The figures on the Zodiac remained silent, our searchlight now glinting off the white reflective patches of their life jackets. We drew alongside the tiny craft, the coxswain adjusting the speed and position as our engines cut, and there was almost total silence save for the waves lapping against both vessels. The tannoy sounded again, as one of the occupants of the craft threw us their mooring lines, and two of the SPD personnel drew alongside them on the port quarter of our stern, within reach of Seaman Cummings, standing dark and tall at his action stations. "This is the captain. SPD, make the Zodiac secure, and Seaman Cummings, you are to board as per regulation procedure." Cummings snapped back his acknowledgement to the order, voicing his "Aye, aye, sir," into the silence. What happened next must have taken place in split seconds, but when I recall it, the event seemed to happen in stop-motion black and white. The images are soundless. The camera moves from location to location and then draws into sharp focus, firstly on the figures on the black rubber Zodiac. Seaman Cummings, I recall the gale and the tannoy calling his name as Scummings, is the next image to be replaced by another, still in sharp black and white, but now in long shot against the backdrop of the moon-drenched night. At this point in the slideshow, Cummings is in the small boat. Another man is up on his feet. He's a small man. The bulk of his life jacket seems to swallow his fragile frame. Behind him, I see a young woman cradling a small child in her arms, her jet black hair wet and plastered to her face. She looks Portuguese and says something in a language I don't understand. She's pulling at the man who is now chest to chest with the imposing figure of able Seaman Cummings. My hearing seems instantly to return after silence. That last image colours up and I feel warmth on my face. There's an orange fireball now midships on the black Zodiac. Cummings is blown into the water. Still, I can see him holding the flare pistol. The orange central mass grows brighter, and others scatter from the boat like leaves shaken loose from autumnal trees in a storm wind. In fact, all the colours of autumn are in the conflagration, but instead of the sounds of the Norfolk landscape under the massive darkening skies, I hear the woman with the black hair screaming. She's trying to beat out the flames, and at the same time she's shielding her little one with a free arm. Her voice is high-pitched. Others scream as well, many clearly in pain as well as shock. On my starboard quarter, I see a small flashing light in the water. The explosion has blown Seaman Cummings away from the Zodiac, and he has drifted down the hull of the BledWell to where he now rests off my watch-keeping station. I train the high-powered binoculars on him and see his face. It is burned, and he is smiling. Copyright Anthony E.C. Linford, Great Yarmouth, 2020.